get started. It's my pleasure to introduce our two speakers tonight. And they're talking about, of course, the 100th birthday of the Tomay Memorial Library. That's Libby Caplan, the Library District Director, and Sean Babbs, the Archive Research Librarian. So Sean and Libby, take it away.
Thanks everybody for coming out. Thanks so much for having us. We're really excited. It is mostly a history of JTML, but you can see we've backed it up just a little because I think the first 25-ish years of history is really interesting, how the library itself starts. So hopefully, probably most of you have a copy of this at this point. It's been out since '88. But if you don't, grab a copy of this in the back. This was produced by Brenda in 1988, history of the library and library association here. Definitely a good source. I tried not to just duplicate the history in here, so I might allude to stuff in here, but hopefully there's not too much crossover. It's also made in the pre-digital age. Now I had the luxury of being able to search historic newspapers online, so especially the early period, we were able to really flesh out because of that. So anyway, yeah, so definitely take a look at this. This is a good history. All right, so I'm going to cover the first up till about 1960, and then Libby's going to cover the more modern history, so that'll be the break in this, and let's see if I can get everything to work. So, yeah, I'll just jump into it. So, libraries, especially in the United States in the late 1800s, are kind of having, I said here, their time to shine. They're popping up everywhere in a lot of different towns. Many of you probably know this. So maybe this is some review. So movement was often led by women's groups, by women, or social betterment organizations. We'll see that's the case in Clear Creek County as well. I think I read like about 75 to 80% of libraries were initiated by women and women's groups around the United States. And you're probably most familiar with, especially in the early 20th century, Andrew Carnegie, who funded 1,700 library buildings around the United States. Obviously, you know, Idaho Springs has a Carnegie Library. Georgetown obviously does not. We'll talk about why that is in a second. But yeah, so that's kind of the backdrop to the beginning of this. So I also wanted, just in this intro, to kind of do a quick comparative of other mountain towns in Colorado when their library associations and library buildings were created. So, and you'll see, especially like Leadville, Salida, Silverton, very similar trajectory to Georgetown and Idaho Springs. So in the 1890s, people are coming together to form these library associations, kind of collect books and let people check them out for free. And then in the case of those three, they each got Carnegies in the first decade of the 20th century. There are a lot of exceptions though. I pulled a couple here, Aspen and Summit County. Those don't actually get libraries till well after this period, so it really depends on kind of the trajectory of the local history in the area. So, and then before we get into Georgetown, I wanted to really quickly mention, as a review, because many of you probably know this, Idaho Springs and also Silver Plume. So Idaho Springs, just like those other towns, Salida, Silverton, those places, they have a library association that starts in 1889. Kind of it's around for a couple of years. It's people kind of coming together to try to form these, but without funding peters out. We'll see this happens in Georgetown too. But by 1898, an actual permanent library association starts, and then of course their Carnegie Library opens in 1904. Silver Plume does attempt and has a library open for 2.5 years. They open, in fact, the same exact month as the public library here in Georgetown, January of 1900. And last until summer of 1902. It was really limited hours. It was just open a couple hours a week, volunteer run. It was initiated by the Village Improvement Society up there. But the town could never commit funding besides a couple donations, and so eventually the library has to shut down because they can't even pay their rent, and the books go to the school in Silver Plume. So kind of two contrasting stories, right? And Georgetown, as we'll see, kind of falls in the middle. Right. So really quickly, a timeline for Georgetown, now that we've seen some other cities. starting in 1882 and kind of going through the 1880s and 1890s, multiple library associations form and kind of peter out. And by 1899, the first permanent library association is formed, and they open in their own space January of 1900. 1904, a building is donated, a house actually, for the library. We'll look at where that is and who did that in 1904. And then, of course, 1924 is when John Tomay Library is constructed that fall. And just kind of the narrative we're going to talk about tonight is, I mean, the library's fate is kind of tied up with the fate of the town, right? So as the town population crashes in the mid-20s and the 30s, the library really struggles, right? So just as John Tomay is getting completed, the library is going through has a lot of issues coming up, mostly related to funding, as we'll see. And then as Georgetown starts to revitalize, of course, 60s, 70s, as populations come back, ski industry is growing, the library also kind of revitalizes with the town. So not a groundbreaking argument or anything, but that the library is tied up with the fate of the town. But let's take a look at that early period, because I find it pretty interesting. So 1882, a group of citizens create the first Georgetown Library Association, and the Courier, they don't talk about numbers at the time. The Courier in the early 1900s mentions it was 100 Georgetown citizens coming together, pooling money and books. It was all volunteer run, there was no city funding, and it kind of peters out. There's some really interesting articles in 1885 where basically the people running the association are threatening to give the books to the school, and then people are interested for a couple of years, and then it kind of peters out again. So yeah, especially in the 1890s, there's not a lot of talk. There's no permanent library here. And could be related to, silver is crashing in the 1890s, population's really transient in Georgetown, and libraries maybe not high on their list. But anyway, in 1899, a group of about 6 women come together to form the Georgetown Library Association, which is the same name, right? But they kind of reincorporate. They don't really seem to tie back to the old one at all. And they hold their books temporarily at a store here in town. And basically you could go into the store and check out books there, but they had open hours for the library after the business closed. And they were able to secure a location in 1900, and I mentioned it opened in January. This was Morris's old store. It's now the building that says Georgetown Museum on it at Towson 7. So 2 of the big names here, Cora Seyfried and Cornelia Randall. So Randall's a key name because this is the wife of the Georgetown Courier's editor, Jesse Randall. So we're really lucky that he was really invested in the library too, so he writes a lot about the library, which is good. And he's a big proponent of funding the library. So in January of 1900, they approached the city and convincingly argue why the library needs to be funded by the public and by the city. And they secure $25 a month, which is a pretty good sum for that time. And one of the ways they convince them to do it is basically arguing the library is going to be a place for social gathering. So not only is there going to be books circulating, but they're going to let it be open in the evenings for free to have a lot of the different groups that were here in Georgetown meet. So that was one of the ways they sold it to the town. Here is the Sanborn map from 1900. You can see they're calling it the free reading room here. I'm zoomed way in, obviously, but this is 7th and this is Taos. We don't know a lot about statistics or anything like that. The paper mentions about a year into the library being open, 242 people came in just 1 week. So it seems to get pretty good usage. It's not a great space. So the Library Association particularly, Cora Seyfried is always looking to expand. So she's really in tune with what's going on around the country. And she starts a correspondence with Andrew Carnegie. And Carnegie actually agrees to purchase Hotel de Paris for the town of Georgetown for a sum of $10,000, provided that the city will pay $1,000 for its upkeep. So Cora goes before the Board of Selectmen and argues this multiple times. Like every month she's there. You can see it in the papers. She's trying to argue, like, if we use we can keep the hotel open and use that to fund part of that money. Because basically Andrew Carnegie will only fund a library if the city guarantees they're going to keep it going, right? This would have been so cool. Obviously, it did not happen. So the city just couldn't commit that much money at the time. Think about it, we're just 10 years after silver has crashed, and people are leaving the town. So a lot of their funding revenue is drying up here as this is happening. And so in 1904, so they're always complaining that the building wasn't great. Obviously, it was kind of retrofitted for the library. So in 1904, Mary Husted, who her husband had been a prominent miner in town. She had quite a fortune, actually, but she donated a house between just about half a block away from where the library was. This is on Taos between 6th and 7th. It's not there anymore. It's back at the Happy Cooker or something. There's no building there. But this is where the library was starting in 1904. So they move all the books there. Actually, the Christian Science Reading Room takes over that Georgetown Museum building, so it stays a reading room in a sense. Also in 1904, again, Cora and the Library Association convinces, or is able to get a ballot measure, and the citizens of Georgetown passed the first mill levy to fund the library. So that's in 1904. Okay. And then here's a Sanborn from 1907 showing where that library is. Here is, it's got to exist somewhere, but I don't have a good picture of the building while it was in use. This is a picture of that building after it was used as a library. Obviously, it's falling apart at this point. This is probably like during the Depression or something. But this was a library for 20 years, so 1904 until Tomay was built in 1924. Obviously, it's a house, so it's also retrofitted to fit a library. Throughout these 20 years, they're always asking the city to fund like additional rooms or like help increase the capacity of the library. This is a really long quote, but this is just kind of what I want to show here is that throughout the first and second decade of the 20th century, the library becomes kind of a central institution in Georgetown. So you can see just how many people are coming. So they're saying they got 117 books in. This is in 1910. And they're claiming all the books were checked out basically that week. Obviously, I told you that Jesse Randall is writing this, whose wife is the vice president of the Library Association. So he obviously has some reason to print this. So they're saying hundreds of people come, lots of children. And it is true, it was really popular with high schoolers. High school social groups often use the library. And then, of course, after all those amazing stats, he's asking for having the building painted, and they're hoping that the town will fund that. So just interesting stuff throughout the night. So in 1911, so the Library Association was kind of just a group. They officially incorporate as a nonprofit in 1911 so that they can actually own this house. So the house was kind of just being held in trust by the people in the Library Association. So Cora Seifried and Cornelia Randall. And, So yeah, I mean, and here's some stats. By the end of 1919, over 5,000 books were loaned that year. They got about 100 new books. 5,000 is really quite a good circulation. So it clearly had become kind of a central institution by about 1920. Here's a nice little report from 1923 on the eve of building moving to John Tomay. So they claim they have about 4,000 books. They're open every evening and 3 afternoons. They check out about 400 books a month, so that's 4,800 a year, so that's still pretty solid. And Pearl, who's writing this, is also saying that students and literary clubs often use the library.
And she's related to the Randalls.
Yeah. She's actually there. I have a whole page on her.
Oh,
so I wanted to highlight a couple of early librarians, because the libraries, the people in the Library Association also kind of served as the librarians at this time. So Cora Seyfried, her name's come up a bunch. She's probably the most important of just getting the library finally established here in Georgetown. She was born in 1856, comes here early, at the age of 21, to teach in Georgetown and Lawson. 1879, she marries Henry Seyfried, and they both spend the rest of their lives here. Like I said, like you've seen, she was instrumental in getting it started. She was trying to work with Carnegie. She basically serves as the president of the association for all 16 years until she dies in 1916. So really important name for that history. And then I also wanted to talk about Pearl Sidney, who you saw right at the end on writing that report. So she's actually the daughter of Jesse Randall, the newspaper editor, and Cornelia Randall, the vice president of the association. So Pearl grows up in Georgetown. She's born here in 1875. And she ends up serving as a Georgetown librarian for 25 years, so 1918 to 1943. So she's the main librarian as the library moves over to Tomay. And then throughout the Great Depression, which, as we'll see, is a really rough time to be a librarian here in Georgetown. I need to find a better picture of her. She looks a little sad in this picture. And she's really young. She's only 20. This is, almost 20 years before she actually becomes librarian, but this is the only picture I could find at the time. Oops, wrong way. All right, so here's part two, kind of the construction of Tomay and the aftermath. So John Tomay dies in 1922, and he leaves his entire estate to the Georgetown Library Association, which is valued around $17,000, which is over $300,000 in today's dollars. So it's a lot of money. And, the library is always looking for funds, so to suddenly get a windfall of this much is a big deal. So who is this John Tomay guy? He was born in 1845, comes here in 1873, just during, the early mining boom. Although he's not really in mining, he's mostly, insurance, real estate, loans, all that's quite related to mining at the time. But he's really active in the community, serving various boards and serves and gets elected as county commissioner. He's known to be generous and caring. Actually, when I was doing that quick research into the Silver Plume Library, he donates a lot of his books up there to try to get that library started too. So he's never actually on the Library Association here, but he's kind of involved in everything. He never gets married, he never has kids, so he kind of left all his money to the city. He did have two brothers, which is key to this story in a second. So he died, the library is, everyone thinks it's good, but there's actually a major drama around the Tomay will. And so soon after he dies, by the summer of 1922, his will's contested. Now this is tough because I'm getting most of my information from the Georgetown Courier. The Courier is very pro-library. And John J. White, the mayor of Georgetown, he'd been here a long time as well. He's a lawyer, and he is the one who initiates the suit. Now, I'll put a quote up in a second, but obviously the paper really turns on John J. White. And also R.R. Graham, who was on the Library Association. So those two actually are the two contesting the will, which seems a little scummy to me, actually, to be fair. I don't know. It's hard to know exactly what happens. The Courier claims that White and Graham see that much money, and they're like, if we can break it, we can get a piece of this. So the Courier is claiming these guys just totally are out for money. It's possible the brothers, Tomay's brothers in Maryland, contact John J. White to actually fight the case. It's really unclear. So White goes to court trying to argue that the Georgetown Library Association was not properly registered in 1911 and thus is ineligible to receive the money. If it can't receive the money will then go to the brothers. And it's presumably John J. White, as the lawyer, will get quite a sum. So that's the background anyway. It languishes in court for 2 years. It goes all the way to the Colorado Supreme Court. But I wanted to put up this quote from the Courier kind of in the middle. Yeah, he's really not hot on John J. White. So he claims, as a result of their treachery, White is no longer mayor of Georgetown. Graham has been ousted as a trustee of the Library Association. That's unsurprising if you're trying to take the money away from the association. But he's claiming, obviously he's saying they just want the money, right? So Randall does claim that Randall seems to think it's basically like if White wins the case, he's going to get most of the money. So it bounces around in the court system for a while, but the Supreme Court here, May 5th, 1924, rules that the money must go to the Library Association. The suit was not valid, so good for the library. Maybe bad for the brothers and John J. White. Anyway, so by summer of 24, they've got the money in hand, and they're putting out bids for the construction of John Tomay Memorial Library. Oops. Here's some names. Actually, I didn't go too much in depth because this book has a lot of good stuff and a lot of scanned original documents from the early construction of Tomay, so I encourage you to look at that. I didn't want to put too many up there when they're already available here. But anyway, so constructed throughout the fall. The Courier has a really good description of laying the cornerstone. Was a big ceremony. This is when the library's not quite done, but a lot of different people are coming up. They get a band come up from Idaho Springs, and then they put a variety of things in there: Tomay's will, history of the Library Association and members, a lot of other things. So this was a big deal for Georgetown, who had, they had come to have great appreciation for the library, but it was always kind of underfunded in a rickety building. So I think the town was quite excited. Grand opening is January 17th, 1925, so that's when the public can first come in. Here's what the building looked like about 1930. So you can see this is before the additions and changes. So this is good. This is kind of like, the height of excitement around the library. You can see I put a big but there, though. And that is because by 1925, the population of Georgetown, and thus the revenue of the city, is absolutely crashing. So here's the official census data. You can see 1900 when the library is starting, it's still a fairly healthy population. It had already been cut in half from kind of the peak in 1880. But there's still a solid group, and a lot of the people had been here decades at this point, so they were really invested in the town. But you can see, drops by 500, drops by a couple hundred, and by 1930, it's a shell, right? 300 people in the town. So, as Tomay is being built, you can see the population drops to over half in the 1920s. We have over at the archives Pearl Sidney's records and books from this period of the early library, and including the funds, and it's pretty dire. She's kind of like, they're barely limping along with mostly overdue fines, like 5 cents here, 10 cents here, 20 cents here. It's really, she took incredibly good notes, but it was rough. The city was not providing much money. We'll see by 1950 how little money the mill levy's bringing in. But you can see by 1938, kind of the tail end of the Great Depression, they're only circulating 900 books a year. And if you remember, just in 1923, they were circulating like 5,000. So a major drop in usage, and that's mostly just because the population's totally evaporated here. So, the building limps along. It was a new building, right? So at least they didn't have too many repairs initially. Here's a nice picture from 1946 by Ben Draper, who, after the war, comes here and does some early historic preservation work. So by this time, the library is 20 years old. It's kind of limping along. And by 1950, it's in total crisis. There's a scan in this book, so I didn't put it up here, from a document in 1950 from someone on the Library Association. kind of reporting the crisis that JTML was in. So Georgetown itself by 1950 had pretty bad infrastructure at this point. I encourage you to, maybe you've heard of a book called The Once and Future Silver Queen by Christine Bradley. I encourage you to look at that book. That has a really good description of all the struggles Georgetown's facing by mid-century, but including sewage going straight into the creek, stuff like that. So by 1950, JTML is only pulling $300 for the whole year. Which obviously couldn't even pay basic upkeep or librarian salary. The furnace hadn't been working for many years at this point. And you'll see if you look at this document, she's like, it brings about the annoying situation of no one being able to use the bathroom most of the year because they had to turn the water off because they didn't want it to freeze. And by this point, they were only open a couple days a week just because besides that it was probably pretty dang cold in there in the winter, they couldn't pay anyone to really be the librarian. So really tough time for JTML. So, but by the 50s, so again, once in future Silver Queen, has a good description of James Grafton Rogers picking up as mayor in 1953 and kind of like cracked down on a lot of the issues the city was facing, really went in and tackled infrastructure. One of the things they did in 1954, so just soon after he becomes mayor, is they actually basically moved the whole city into the Tomay Library. So the town clerk becomes a librarian, they move all the offices, like most of the city offices, into the basement of that building, and that kind of is how they limp this building along for 20 years. Which is rough, but pretty genius just to keep it around and to keep the library functioning, because it was still an important community point. It's just they didn't have any real means to fund it. So that's kind of the situation of the library by about 1960. So obviously there's a ton of activity in the early 20th century, and kind of the library becomes a staple of the town. They build Tomay in 25, but pretty quickly, Georgetown in the library is going through a rough patch. So, until 67, the whole town's basically, all the offices are located in Tomay. But obviously, and luckily for the library, the winds of change were coming in the 60s and 70s as Georgetown and everything else is kind of getting a new outlook. So that's my section, and now I'm going to hand it off to Libby to talk about the more modern stuff.
Yep, that's it.
Okay.
Down
Perfect.
is next slide.
Down is next slide. Okay. Sean is amazing, and I wish I would have gone first, but he's the history guy, so I have to follow him. So, new outlook going on in Georgetown. Yay. So, we're back to Sean's chart, and as you can see, population is increasing, climbing throughout the next few decades. And there's a sharp increase, and we have industry that moves into the county. So, we have the mining and the tunnel and all sorts of good stuff. And so we'll just talk about new growth. I'm going to talk about a little bit, the timeline is going to go back and forth just a little bit because I talk about expansion of the building, because we're kind of highlighting the building, and then also the expansion of services. So nobody likes to tell history that people lived. So feel free to correct me, because most of you lived this. This is why Sean stopped and threw it over to me. So Fashing Day, Christmas market, all these amazing activities come, and Georgetown becomes, like the New Orleans of the mountains. Like, we're a fun place to be and visit, and that is good for our residents and so great for our library services. Also notable things that happen is obviously Loveland and the ski industry picking up in the 60s. the National Historic Landmark District. We get I-70, so we're getting tons of folks. And we have the Georgetown Society Inc. So new growth and continued support for library services. So we become more focused and functioning, and people love the library here. So the Friends of the Library is created officially in 1977. And then we have in the 1980s, the towns, both in Idaho Springs and Georgetown, are not funding the libraries properly. And so they're looking for solutions for that. So in the 80s, they become a department in the county. And they're run with some county funds. And that works until it doesn't work. There's some HR stuff, there's some budget stuff. The board of trustees don't really have control of the budget. And so in 1991, in my notes, it's in quotes as a divorce letter between the libraries and the county is formed. And then they set to resolution in 1993 and fund the library off of $1.5 million. And there is a decline again in funding. So approximately 20 years later, voters, they go out to vote for another 0.5 mil with a total of 2 mils. So that's what we're operating on now. This is one of the early, this is one of the early logos of the library district. I think Stephanie Mellon designed it actually in, probably 2012 is when I first see it in some of our newsletters. So I'm gonna jump back a bit. So building upgrades, in the 60s and the 70s, folks do a lot of work. They do a lot of it with writing grants and volunteer hours. Those volunteer hours include the construction of stuff and some renovations. So we get new shelving for the interior in 67. In the 70s, the outdoor boxes that are there are put up. In 1981, we get new outside steps. Some in the 80s, so there was a long time, we get the new Edward Ploss Memorial Plaza. So that's the East Library Park that's still there today. In 1983, this is, we have possibly the oldest flagpole in the state that I could not find any confirmation about, but the flagpole is still there in front of the library. In 87, they do some interior renovations again, and in 1988, the Friends opened a book sale. What was that building called again, Sean? Do you remember? Barnes Hall, yeah.
That was like the 19th century.
Yeah, and then it was, quiz. Okay, I'll look it up for you in a minute. But the Friends has a book sale in 1988, and it's so effective we still have it today.
Outside of Tomay at first.
Yes, not within the library. That's important. So in 1988, they start arranging nonfiction in the basement, in the children's room, in the east half of the main thing, and it's busy, it's booming. And so about 1991, they look at, renovating, and I love this construction cost. I'm sure you can't see it, but it is $150,000 for the new edition, which is amazing. And so this is the new children's edition that they're looking at for the space. This is the Edward Ploss Plaza. This is where the stage is today. So fun space. They get it done, and it looks great. And then we're jumping a little bit again back. I just wanted to point out the decades vaguely. If you want to share your experience with the library during these time periods, that would be amazing. But what I noted going through the notes was the volunteerism was strong. There was strong support for library services. They had the kazoo band tradition. They picked that back up. This is the original library. The Georgetown Library Association, women associated with it, dressed like as suffrages in This is in 1980. They redid it about 100 years later. So very cool women. And I think Ellen Elliott wants to do this soon. Again, some 4th of July parade. But we have your books, Read More Books tradition still going on, which started in this time period. Fundraising efforts were amazing. So they had meals at the Hotel de Paris. They had rummage sales out front. They spent time collecting people's items that they didn't want and selling that. Anyway, they were putting efforts forward to make money, kind of like our friends group today. Right, Susan? Soup, books, whatever it goes on. Friends book sales are strong. And Story Hour really starts to grow. They have a great partnership with the school, which we continue. And now we're in super modern day. So there's obviously a technology shift. I think in 2009, we're like wireless Wi-Fi at the library. We're just promoting laptops and bring your own device in. We expand our community hub vibes, so it's already been there, but we're hoping more meetings come. We have a historic review, which is sort of important because there are things that need fixed at the building. We start a prioritization of local history. We expand programming and outreach. We strengthen our partnership, and we really work on branding during this current history because we're doing all this stuff and not getting credit for it. So we pretty much logo and brand everything in this time period so people know that it's our services and it's coming from us. And my head gets big because I feel like I'm a part of this. So I'm going to go back to spaces because we, under John Ewers, they are creative with spaces and they create some amazing spaces. So in 2008, they do the dedication of the park, which allows for some amazing programs. This is with the Trust. They have the beautiful dancing. We have mountain jams, which has continued to go on. Slacker Race traditionally ended there. So lots of fun stuff with the expansion of the stage. And Kathy Hafe was the architect on that. So give credit where credit is due. She did an amazing job. It's wonderful. And we just continue to expand it so the stage is now heated and lighting and super fun stuff. And then, since John's not done, in 2012, the Friends with John built a solarium out back. So here's the solarium. And the solarium is beautiful and wonderful. He puts a reading nook with a circus netting tent. The insurance doesn't like it, but I think it's a brilliant idea. And then he adds art into the space, again with the Friends. So this is the mosaic, the Starry Night and Beyond, beautiful. And then there's gardening in it, which you can kind of see in our photo here. So bringing the outdoors indoors, he was way ahead of his time because that was a huge thing after the pandemic was to do that. And then we decided to expand into new spaces. So this is sort of the time I'm coming on to the library district. But Christine Bradley, not as an employee, but as a committee member for the archives, is sitting in the archive space, which opened in 2017. It's in the second floor of the old school, if you're not familiar with that. She also is spearheading the digitization of all our local Clear Creek newspapers, about 5,000 to 6,000 a year of that, so they're searchable and they won't be lost in somebody's attic. So this space opens up, we're really proud of it. There's too much history to house it at the John Tomay because it's too big. In 2018, we focused on our mission statement, one of our hugest advocates. But we had a big staff outing, and we sort of did the post-it board thing where it was like, what does the library mean to you? And you add your post-it notes. And as a team, we came up with our mission statement. To simplify it, we connect, discover, and empower. And these are sort of our values. So we wanted to be able to be like, what are we? What do we do? And can we say yes to this project? If it fits within this, then we'll partner and try to say yes to this. So some great work by our team to get that going. I just wanted to touch on the pandemic a little bit because it changed, obviously, library services being a community hub. We did lots of fun stuff, all to keep everyone safe. And it kind of shifted our services. So we knew that people wanted ebooks and audiobooks more. We just hadn't been purchasing the right amounts. We offered home delivery. We had before, but we had that amplified it and showed us that there was a barrier and a need for people to get those services. We did curbside delivery, which some people still want at our branch because they don't want to come in or there's not parking, so they'll just pull in front of the stop sign really quick, grab our stuff. And the partnerships and outside programming has been a huge thing, which was amazingly set up by the Friends of the Library stage. So some excellent work there. We continue all those services because there was a huge need there. And then we continue to expand our programs. The Lieutenant Governor came to the school and then came to the library and read to the kids recently, which was fantastic. We do Storybook Character Week, which is really cool to see a book character come to life and give you a hug. The kids love it. I have had to be in the costume at least 3 times during those National Library Weeks because I'm a jack of all trades. And I fit in the costume. Well, look how tall Lyle is. And then, for those of you that don't know, our program and development director, Holly, is a published author through Penguin, and she has a 3-book mystery series about Victorian times. And the 5th graders come and they read the book with her, they discuss it, and then at the end of 4 to 6 weeks, they have a Victorian tea party to celebrate. So one thing, again, out of the pandemic was expanding with the schools, with our programs. We wanted the kids to stay safe, so we met them where they were at, and it was just so rewarding for both parties. It was a win-win, so we continue our partnerships with the school. Other unique programming, because why not snowshoe for free for your library and learn from Kimberly Knox with the outdoors business she has. Ghost hunting, apparently that's really big because it's back next month by popular demand. And this is an older one, but we had a family spelling bee, and this woman, I think this was her Christmas card photo because she was so happy to win the spelling bee, which is so hard. I think I was out in the 2nd round. But we partnered with the Alpine Restaurant for that. So just fun, creative activities going on, expanding your regular sources. As a history talk, one of our newest librarians is Miss Honeybun. She's our puppeteer rabbit. I have to bring her up because she is so popular among the kids and visible. These are our little Georgetown students, another 5th grade Victorian tea, where Miss Honeybun wears the outfit. She wanted to be here tonight, but she's out with Haley Washington at Smoking Yards right now. Haley Washington let her bite her gold medal, so she's a big library advocate. She's the Olympian from our community, if you did not know. So now we're to the future and questions, but the future is our library needs a renovation. And so we've had a few meetings about that, but this is the photo of the renovation we're looking at. This is the book sale room up like a store on the front vibe for folks. And so this is the children's area right here, and our original John Tomay. Other things in the future is our operational and funding shortages. So the library is going to a point where we haven't asked for money in 20 years, and I don't know if you know what you made 20 years ago from now. We're in a little bit of need. We've lost about 1/3 to 1/2 of our funding over the last 10 to 15 years. So there is a ballot initiative. I'm not going to talk about that tonight. If others want to, I will invite you to. And I'm not persuading you to vote anyway, but I think it's important you know our staff the library district has gone from 16 to 26, so most of us are doing a couple jobs.
Vice versa.
Oh, yes, sorry, thank you.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I'm a numbers gal. And we're asking for the, a pretty minimal amount. There's a fact sheet that somebody brought, which I'm super happy. But the typical house that's valued at $550,000, the cost is $2.65 per month. So it's about $30 annually. Obviously, if your home price differs from that, you can do the math, possibly better than me tonight. So we want to continue all the amazing programs and outreach that we can do. We want to renovate the John Tomay Memorial Library, but we need operational funds if we're going to continue to do that. Are there any questions for Sean or myself before we move on? Hey, John.
Sean, I found it interesting that there's a big push for libraries starting in the 1890s through the 1920s, early 30s. Is there any correlation to the literacy rate?
Yeah, I mean, so, yeah, that libraries are, like big cities, New York and stuff, they had libraries for a long time. But, kind of small town America, this is really the time when libraries are happening. And yeah, it's an intersection of a lot of stuff, right? So books are still expensive, which kind of necessitates library, but the price is really falling. And so like it's easier for a library to acquire a big collection. Yeah, literacy rates, yeah, if you look at kind of literacy rates from the Industrial Revolution, so from 1800 up to 1900, yeah, they're just vastly increasing. Think about like, universal education is kind of coming about in the 19th century. So yeah, literacy rates really help. But yeah, it's also a moment because I didn't really mention this in the talk, but libraries are kind of seen as a way to kind of improve the social fabric, right? And books and education and libraries, so they all are kind of going hand in hand. And it wasn't really clear in the stuff I talked about tonight, but I think I alluded to like Cora Seyfried, who kind of started the whole thing. She was a teacher, right? She started as a teacher. And so, the books are kind of like, I told you, Silver Plume books are going to the library. Georgetown almost gives their books to libraries, stuff like that. Or to the school, sorry. Library books to the school. So there's a lot of interplay between schools, libraries, and just social organizations generally. There is this sense of like, kind of like moral and upstanding nature of literacy, of education that libraries can provide. So I kind of mentioned like the social betterment organizations that are really popping up around the country in the same period. So yeah, all of those kind of mesh together to create that moment. In Colorado, particularly in the 1890s, you saw all those different towns are starting in the 1890s come together to coalesce around libraries. Yeah, it's really cool. The thought of it. I can wax poetic about libraries, right? But like the central theme is still really impressive that it exists today because it's kind of like one of the few just spaces you can go and not purchase anything. You don't have to do anything. You can get stuff for free. You can just sit there. So that's kind of the unique nature, and I think that's why libraries came about and why they still exist. So yeah, that was a long-winded answer to say, yeah, that's all coming together.
So on the table, we can pass these out. There's a fact sheet about, for 6A, kind of spells out the reasons for it. The website's there. You can go for more information. We just really need people to talk about it and encourage people to vote. So often, you get your ballot, there's all these ballot issues, and they're the boringest things, and they're long, and nobody wants to read through all that. Skip all of them but ours. You have permission to just look for the 6A and vote yes if you're so inclined. We would ask you to do that. But we'll be around the next few weeks talking to groups and promoting this. We just need your support. We need you to talk to your friends and in support of those. Yeah.
Because part of this is because in this county, the value of one mill has gone down. So substantially? Does anybody have the, approximate difference in what a mill was worth 5 years ago and what a mill is worth now?
Yeah, it's a third of the 300, and I think it's 317,000 is what they're estimating right now.
And
Our
it used to be,
about $900,000 a mill.
so that's what's,
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, it is the, essentially the decline of production in Henderson.
Exactly.
yeah.
Everybody's, all the public entities is bringing their revenues down, because that's what determines the value of the mill, is how much that property value is. So it's not as though the library, it's not as though the library has chosen to do anything that has created this difficulty. It's just watched its revenue out of the same number of mills. It's watched its revenue steadily decline over the last, particularly over the last about 6 years.
Yeah,
Buy more molybdenum, that's what we do.
and absolutely, your board
Increase
of
your value.
trustees
Get a pin.
have been planning for this. We knew mining operations were declining, and fortunately, we have a very good savings with the library district, but we can't continue to spend into a deficit of that, and that is for our historic buildings. We have a 120-year-old building, and we have a 100-year-old building here, and we want to be able to maintain those in emergency, and we earn interest off of our savings too, which saves taxpayers money that we don't have to dip into. So, but we're getting to the point where we're spending into a deficit annually, and we hope that people love library services and they want to support it.
Yes.
We don't want it to be in 1950 again.
We don't want the heat to go out and the restrooms not work, especially with 70,000
That's a joke. I have to make that clear. We won't be that dire, I promise.
And the good news with this mill levy is it's Clear Creek money for Clear Creek residents. The residents that get the library card and all the resources. And, I'm happy to talk more in depth with it.
How many people any idea how many people use the library in a month or a year?
So on normal years, it's a little interesting because there's a pandemic skew there,
Right,
but it's
yeah.
70 to 90,000 through the
Wow.
branches, both branches, that
Yeah.
are all 3 branches, that is. So.
That's a lot. Yeah.
That's a lot of people
Yeah,
for a little county.
yeah, for a county of almost 10,000.
Yeah.
I'm curious, Libby, it's interesting when Sean's talking about like how do you measure the activity or maybe the success to some degree of a library. You're talking about so many books are in circulation, but now the libraries do so much more. Like how do you express, how do you measure, how do you express the success of what you do? Because it's so much more than just books.
I appreciate that opportunity. So we obviously want people to know what we do, and the best people to tell us that are our patrons. So if you go to our YouTube page, we now have some patron videos and testimonies and interviews about how the library has affected their lives in such a positive way. So, I can tell you when I see the kid that is uncomfortable reading a chapter book, but reads the chapter book because they're excited for the tea party at the end of it, and Miss Honey Bun's there, and there's crumpets and lemonade and all sorts of fun stuff. The reluctant reader that life has changed. Haley Washington's a perfect example of that. She grew up in the library districts here, and she came back, and every time she comes back to town, she writes us a check, and she does promos for us, and she's an Olympian, and she doesn't have very much time, and that's what she keys in on. Those are some of the stories we have. We work with a lot of seniors. If you have tech issues, come in. That's sort of other resources. If you're swearing at your iPad because it is not downloading what you need to download, don't go to the Apple store, come to us, we'll help you out with it. If you don't have those resources, come to us. If your internet's out, the power line project has been amazing. There's so many millennials that telecommute that came in to use our electricity and Wi-Fi because our side of town was good and their side of town wasn't. And so there's lots of fun ways. But
You also keep track. I mean, I keep track too. You know, you
Yeah, we
keep track
keep
of
track.
who comes in and what types of services
yeah,
reference and all of that.
yeah, Christine gets about $1 million a year.
Oh lordy, yeah.
She doesn't count them right though.
I know I don't. I can't figure out how to say, and then I talk to so and so for an hour.
Yeah, the historic archives has been really fun. I sometimes work there, and so Christine, people will come in and talk to Christine, and I love to listen to people explain history to Christine. It's like one of my favorite activities. It's very entertaining.
It's true.
One of the things that you might mention, there are people here who might do this. I have my new $10 library card.
Ah.
I think it is well worth it to give that money to the library. So if you want to mention a little more about
Thank
that.
you, Pauline. So library cards are still free, but because we're celebrating 100 years here, there is a commemorative card. There's only a certain number of them, 250. So if you want a commemorative card, they are $10. That money goes directly back to the library to support our mission and what we do. And they're beautiful. It's the library in winter because we're Georgetown and we're the Christmas market town. Very cute. Oh, Tom has one up, so.
Tomay Library or the Carnegie Library, I was sure.
Or Miss Honeybun.
Our Miss Honeybun. Yeah.
One of my favorite things right now at the library, if you're paying for a New York Times subscription, you don't have to do that anymore. You can go to the library, click on a link. It takes a couple clicks to get to the news and the games, but you have to sign in every day. But it's saving me that money.
It's $60 for Friday through Sunday a month.
Yeah.
So it's a huge savings if you're a New York Times reader.
And we weren't getting through them. I mean, they'd sit on the table all week long and not get read. So now at least I'm saving money and still enjoying it.
The library's also been very helpful. Heather allows us, the library, to use this to help with the setup for Devil's Gate. And also our Devil's Gate programs, since we started recording them on the iPad, are out on the library's YouTube page. You're out there too, Maria, with your teaching Spanish to children. Yeah, but we've got some of our programs there, and I'm going back to put older programs onto our digital page. And if I had my act together this last week, I would have printed out which programs are out there, but I didn't. We'll get to it. But anyway, for the older Devil's Gate programs, like Greg Markle's program on the history of K-Goat, which makes me laugh all the time. It's wonderful. And Don Janoff's program on Mount Bierstadt, Dave Primus's program on the Hangover Mine, and all of those are out there now. So that's fun.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I've seen online how you can rent all these things now that are at the library, and I'm thinking, but does that kind of distract from, what your focus should be, or maybe, I don't know, just now that it's a tool store, and a kitchen store, and I don't know, it just seems like it's over the top of where do you get all these things? Store all these things.
So it's the Library of Thanks is what she's talking about, and these are all patron-driven requests. As you know, some of us in Colorado have small kitchens and small houses, and so somebody only wants to make beans in an Instant Pot once a year. They wanted to swing by the library and not buy that resource on their own. We also have a metal detector and telescope. We see libraries as multiple literacies. So it's not just reading a book. There's financial literacy classes that we have. Metal detecting leads to lots of geological literacies and other exploring things in fun ways. So that was patron driven. So we do what our patrons request. For kiddos, we have like a Harry Potter coding wand, so they learn code, and then the wand does magical things for you. We have the microscope, which is really wonderful to see another level of our biology. And so, yeah, and then we have a bunch of tech stuff too, because we know that there's some barriers. It's tough in the mountains for rural services, so the hot spots. If you're a senior, you can get a lifetime Kindle from us, and you just make a library appointment with our tech coordinator, Heather, and she'll set you up for reading on a laptop. Why we like Kindles and endorse them is because you can change the text size to any size you need, so if your eyes are deteriorating.
Yeah, libraries have always been community and information hubs, even, you know, in the late 19th century. So I think the beauty of them is they've always adapted to the needs of the people that use them, right? The needs of the people they serve. So I might have not emphasized that enough in the historical perspective, but, you know, they're always, that's the beauty of libraries, is they change based on what people want and need. So.
And we're very resourceful, so we work off a lot of donations. Somebody donated a sewing machine that will be added to the Library of Things. We're getting a ukulele. Our snacks are donated by food banks for Rocky Mountains. We find that kids that are hungry don't behave very well, so we have snacks all over the library. That's also for adults. I guess there's adults that don't behave well because they're hangry too. So I shouldn't single out the kids. But we don't pay for those snacks. That was a question that came up. And so we try to be resourceful with every dollar and respect that it's tax money.
You're doing a lot more on Fridays now with the 4-day school week too.
Yeah. So
Today.
we moved our story hour to Fridays. There's a little bit more preschool options, and so we were competing with some of those during the week. So we have preschool activities, and then we have fun for the tween and young 10 to 14-year-olds. I would say we have some activities on Fridays. We also have a cool internship program to get kiddos experience for the real world, and that's been pretty successful. One of our interns just retired from her internship, but she worked with us for 3 years through high school, so pretty exciting stuff.
Yay.
Some fun programs. I'd be happy to talk about it more, so please stop by. I also have my cards if anybody's interested in contacting me one-on-one. I want people to have information, and if you have any questions about anything with library services, I will talk your ear off.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.